Welcome back to AP World History. We have been talking about the world becoming a global market, that the various European powers bringing different parts of the world uh, in direct contact with Europe, trading various items. One of the things that we talked about, of course, this was the secret words for this video, the Columbian Exchange. Um, the fact that the Europeans got more from the Americans than the Americans got from the Europeans. One of the things that is going to come out of this Columbian exchange is the improved diet from potatoes and corn coming from the Americas. In exchange, the Indians got disease, and they also got some draft animals, some crops, but certainly the Europeans do much better than the people in the Americas, Central, South, and North America. And this is going to allow the Europeans to grow in population because they have a more stable diet. Some of the places that are going to be open to Europeans, the Portuguese will establish 2 points of contact with Japan: Kyoto, which later becomes Tokyo, Nagasaki. But eventually, the Dutch and the Portuguese will be expelled from Japan, and they'll kind of close up into their own little world. Korea never did trade with European powers until much later. In the Mediterranean, there's a balance shift in terms of power. The Ottoman Turks, who had controlled the Mediterranean, at least a good share of the Mediterranean, are going to be defeated at the Battle of Lepanto uh, off the coast of Greece, and this is going to give Europeans a little bit more breathing space in the Mediterranean. This shows the battle of the Christians versus the Muslims, and the Christians prevailing in Lepanto. Sinking of an Ottoman Navy vessel. One of the things that will come out of this trade is a concept called mercantilism. And that is simply this: that the colonies that these European uh, countries establish are there to make money for the mother country. They will supply the raw materials, and the mother country will supply the finished goods. Of course, this is going to bring a lot of money into these countries in terms of taxes, and they're going to force a colony to buy from the mother country. To produce crops in the colonies, Europeans traded their finished goods for slaves from Africa, so the slave trade will pick up. Forced labor became a pattern that the Europeans are going to employ in the New World, particularly the Portuguese and to a certain extent the Spaniards, but not to the same extent of the Portuguese. Uh, and European powers will use slaves to harvest sugarcane in Brazil and in the Caribbean. Colonies will become dependent on the finished goods from the mother country under this uh, mercantile system. Of course, we looked at the fact that the Spanish, because they defeated King Montezuma, the Aztecs will come under the control of the Spaniards in 1521 in what we call Mexico. Francisco Pizarro will defeat Atahualpa in Peru, and they will take over the Incan Empire there. So South America and Central America will become under the control of the Spaniards. One of the things that is vital to trade with India, and particularly China, is the silver that's going to come out of uh, Peru. And this silver is going to flood into the Spanish government, and they're going to use that as an exchange to buy Chinese goods. Again, this showing, of Cortez defeating Montezuma. We looked at this before. And the death of Montezuma, and the Spanish taking over Central America. Later, Pizarro will, again, we talked about this before, defeat Atahualpa, and the Incas will come under Spanish control. Now, in terms of the French, they will explore Canada and the Caribbean. Samuel de Champlain, called the father of New France, will establish their capital in the New World, if you will be in Quebec. It'll be their main trading post. Robert de La Salle will sail from Quebec into the Great Lakes, down the Mississippi, to New Orleans, and give this land to, or claim it for France. France probably had the least impact on the Native Americans. They saw them as trading partners. They treated the Native Americans far better than any of the other European powers. They were kind of selective in who they would let go to the New World, to Canada, which is going to put them at a disadvantage to the British later on, because they won't have as many settlers. The British and the French will fight a 7 Years' War in 1754, and eventually the French will be defeated, and at the Treaty of Paris in 1763, they will give up their claim in North America. And this will be a big boost for the British. The British will establish their first permanent colony in Jamestown in Virginia at 1609. This shows a reproduction of what might have looked like in Jamestown. They settled in the Chesapeake area, and there they will establish plantations. Eventually, what makes a colony work is the growing of tobacco. But they had their share of problems. People died like flies. Life expectancy was probably around 35. 9 out of the 10 people coming over died from disease. So it's not a very healthy place to be. The English were the last to settle North America, and the colonists will become big consumers of English goods, and they will send back products to the mother country. The English settlers who come over are seen as second-class citizens to those living in England. Eventually, there will be some problems over taxation, and the Americans, or the colonists, the 13 colonists, will rebel against England and win their independence. Initially, the Portuguese and the Dutch were primary colonies were in Africa, in Southeast Asia. Most of the European settlers were along the coast of Africa. Very little inroads were made into the interior. It was considered the Dark Continent. So the Dutch will have a colony in the Cape area, which is now South Africa. They will be called the Boers, and eventually they'll clash with the Bantu tribes, the Zulus, and eventually they will fight the English at the turn of the century, the 20th century, and eventually be defeated. As far as the British go, they truly will become a world beater. They will have colonies in the Americas, Africa, and in Asia. The term "the sun never sets" on their empire became true. Their crown jewel will be India. They will eventually, after the 7 Years' War with France, kick them out, and they will have sole possession of India in terms of trade. Eventually, they will subdue the subcontinent, and it will all come under their control. There were a lot of local Indian rulers who were fragmented and really didn't put up a united front against the British, but the British will eventually subdue them and they will make it a colony. Um, so that's going to be an important trading partner for the British in Asia. It shows India in the 18th century and 19th century, all this area coming under British control. And we'll stop right there.